Hey Tracy, it's Paxton Marco. The date is March 28th, and I'm going to point out some of the different organs of the lymphatic system and then explain to you the flow of lymph through the body. So I'm going to start, by the way, I'll point out some things on myself and some on the skeleton, and hopefully it will give you a sense that I know where these different organs are. So the first thing I want to start with is the tonsils. There's three I want to point out. Use a pen to point it out. The pharyngeal tonsil is located at the back of the throat. So if you can imagine, he's opening his mouth really wide. The pharyngeal tonsil is in the nasopharynx area. So basically the nasal cavity opening behind and above the uvula. And the uvula is that little thing that you see when you open your mouth really wide or you look in someone's throat, and there's that little drop down in the middle, kind of like a bell or a teardrop shape. That is your uvula. So imagine that the pharyngeal tonsil is located behind and above it. The palatine tonsils lay on each side of the pharynx, so on either side. And these are ones that are pretty, when they're inflamed, when someone's sick, you can usually tell, and it's the palatine ones that are inflamed, and you can see they look like two bulges on either side. And then finally, the lingual tonsil is at the back of the tongue. So if you imagine someone sticking their tongue out, it's located back on it. All right, the thymus. The thymus is located behind the sternum. This is your sternum or your breastbone, and in front of the aorta of the heart, in between the lungs. So if you can imagine, behind the sternum is your heart. On either side of that is your lungs, and the thymus is going to sit kind of in front, on top of the aorta, in between the lungs. I think of it as little butterfly wings, and it just sits right there. Now, the cervical lymph nodes are bean-shaped organs that are found in the neck, and they're located on the anterior and the posterior aspects of the neck, as well as the underside of the jaw. So there's superficial and deep anterior cervical lymph nodes. Excuse me, oh my gosh. So sorry. These are lymph nodes that lie on top and beneath the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So I'm running my hands down it. You have that muscle on either side of your neck. And those anterior, they run in a line down that. Now you also have posterior cervical lymph nodes that I mentioned, and those extend in a line posterior to the sternocleidomastoid muscle on either side. And then, like I mentioned, you also have a number that are under your jaw. So one that I'll point out are your tonsillar, which I can feel mine maybe because they're a little inflamed right now, but if you just palpate, you can feel them right there. And there's other lymph nodes that run under your chin in addition to the tonsillar ones. So the axillary lymph node is the lymph nodes that are located in and around your underarms. So for example, like this, they kind of can run here and in here a little bit. That's the axillary. Your spleen is attached to the lateral border of the stomach. So if you can imagine, and mind you, this might be flipped in the video, but on this right side, a pretty significant portion kind of goes up under the ribs is your liver. And on the left side, under some of these last ribs right here, is where your spleen is. Like I said, it's attached to the lateral border of the stomach. All right, the Peyer's patches. Peyer's patches are a type of mold or mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue that's found in the ileum. And the ileum is the lower portion of the small intestine. So the best way I can describe this is, let's see if I can just point out a general structure. So imagine that this, which I'm showing you right now, this tract is your large intestine. 2 out of the 3 portions of your small intestine sit kind of within or more medial to this large intestine. And that's the jejunum, which is up here. So here's the portion of a large intestine, jejunum, and then the ileum. So the ileum is that lower portion. And the ileum, like I said, is where the Peyer patches are. And then finally, the appendix. So the first part of the large intestines is called the cecum, and the appendix is a tube that attaches to the cecum. All right, awesome. So the last thing that I want to do is just explain the flow of lymph in the body. So plasma is released into the interstitial space of the tissues by capillary filtration. And when plasma is out of the bloodstream and is in the tissue spaces, it's referred to as interstitial fluid. So a portion of this interstitial fluid is going to drain into the lymphatic system and then empty back into the bloodstream. And this interstitial fluid will be called lymph once it's in the lymphatic system. So two things to note about the lymphatic system and the flow of lymph. First off, unlike blood, which flows in this continuous loop throughout the body, lymph only flows in one direction. It flows upwards towards the neck. This upward movement is depends on the motion of muscles and valves that are in the lymphatic vessels, which function similarly to the valves that are found in the heart. They basically ensure that the lymph continues to move in one direction. So the interstitial fluid in the tissues, some of it enters the lymphatic system through lymphatic capillaries and becomes lymph fluid. The lymphatic capillaries then empty into lymphatic vessels, which are larger than the capillaries and have the one-way valves that I mentioned. And along the course of lymphatic vessels are lymph nodes. And we have about 500 to 600 lymph nodes located throughout the body, such as the armpits, so the axillary lymph nodes I pointed out, the cervical lymph nodes I pointed out in the neck, the groin, the chest, the abdomen. And the lymph nodes, their job is to filter out waste products that are found in the lymph. And they also contain lymphocytes, which are these white blood cells that kill pathogens that might be present in lymph. So unfiltered lymph is going to flow into the lymph nodes via the afferent lymphatic vessels. And the subscapular sinus is a portion of the lymph node where the afferent lymph flows into the tissue. So once it's flowed in, the lymph flows through the medulla and then the medullary sinus before leaving the node via the efferent lymphatic vessel. So then the lymph keeps flowing through the lymphatic vessels, and the superficial and the deep lymphatic vessels are eventually going to merge to form the lymphatic trunks. And in turn, the lymphatic trunks are going to drain into the lymphatic ducts, and there's two of them in the body. So we have the right lymphatic duct, which receives lymph from only the upper right side of the body, so the right side of the head, the thorax, and the upper arm. And the lymph that enters this duct is going to drain into the right subclavian vein to enter the bloodstream. Alternatively, the thoracic duct receives lymph from all the other parts of the body that didn't flow into the right lymphatic duct. So the lower leg, or both legs, the lower trunk, upper left portion of the chest, the left arm, for example, and the thoracic duct is going to drain lymph into the left subclavian vein to enter the bloodstream. All right, so I think that I have covered everything. Hopefully it's all clear. I look forward to your feedback and recording my next video for you. Thanks.